My name is Jason, and this is Just Watches. Today we have the Royalguard 200 from Imperial Watch Company. Now, the second I saw this watch on Instagram, I was intrigued, and I was lucky enough to be able to borrow a prototype for review today. However, before we get to that review, if you're enjoying the contents of this channel, I invite you to subscribe, and if you're enjoying the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much. At the time of this recording, this watch is available on pre-order for $350, but that price will increase to $400 on December 1st with a final MSRP of $450. The case is 38mm in diameter, 47mm lug to lug. It's 14mm thick, but I would say about 1mm of that is this domed sapphire crystal, and then it has a 20mm lug with opening. Now sized up for my 6 3/4 inch wrist, it weighs in at 128 grams. The case has circular brushing on the top of the mid case, with a high polished chamfer that transitions into brushed sides. The lugs are pierced and angled down slightly. There is an unguarded crown that adds to the vintage feel of this watch. The finishing is very good for this price point. There is a great balance of the case back, mid case, and bezel and crystal. As such, the watch does not wear as tall as the 14mm thickness might suggest. The 20mm bracelet has a dramatic taper to 16mm before jumping back up to 18mm at the clasp. I really love a 4mm taper. I think it helps a watch both look and wear better than a bracelet that either doesn't taper or only tapers 2mm. The solid end links have a touch of play, but nothing you would notice on the wrist. The end links are actually a touch shorter than the lugs, and the bracelet articulates flat against the back of the watch. The articulation between the links is also fantastic. These two factors are important for overall bracelet comfort. The 3-link style features brushing on the center link and high polish on the outer links. Usually I'm not a fan of high polish on links, but the execution here is perfect. The high polished links are thin, so the effect is subtle and not too blingy. The clasp is a double push deployment with a signed safety catch. The scissor is fully milled and there are 4 micro positions. This in combination with the small links will help you find a good size. Sizing is accomplished with split pins. I'm a huge fan of this bracelet overall. Not only is it extremely comfortable, but the execution of the high polish on those thin outer links is really well done. This watch is powered by the Seiko NH35. This is a hacking, hand-winding, 21,600 vibration per hour movement with a 42-hour power reserve and a stated accuracy of -20 to +40 seconds a day, but I usually find they run closer to plus or minus 10 seconds a day. Now, while this is a no-date dial, we do have a ghost position. However, I think this is forgivable at this price point. Now this one is running a bit out of spec, but remember this is a prototype that has really been through the ringer. If you buy one of these new, I would expect it to run plus or minus 10 seconds a day. The 7mm screw-down crown is engraved with the Imperial Watch Co logo. Now, I love large crowns like this. I think they both look cool and also make winding and operating the watch a breeze. Also, the knurling of the crown nicely matches the knurling of the bezel. At first, I thought this was an acrylic crystal, but it is actually a domed sapphire with anti-reflective coating. I don't really know how they pulled it off, but it really does have that warmth of acrylic and causes awesome distortions when viewing the watch from an angle. This is another aspect of this watch that really captures that vintage feel. The 120 click unidirectional bezel is nicely knurled with high polish on the top of the knurling that adds just a touch of flash. The action is tactile, clicky, and tight. It is a touch hard to turn as the edge of the bezel is a bit thin. However, everything lines up at 12 nicely. The aluminum insert is a faded blue with diving markings. The color is really nice and pairs well with the dial and gilt indices. Aluminum was a great choice and again helps preserve the overall vintage feel of the watch. Now the dial and hands are a remix of the Eberhard Scafograf 200 with a few changes. The color is a deep, shiny black with a beautiful gilt color for the minute markers around the edge of the dial. The indices are a combination of circles and triangles. Imperial Watch Co is printed at 12 on a jaunty angle. I absolutely love this detail. Royalguard 200 rounds out the text at 6. There is no date or any other text on the dial, and the indices are perfectly symmetrical. The gilt color used perfectly complements the black dial and faded blue bezel. The handset is similar to the one used on the Eberhard, but they put the large triangle on the minute hand rather than the hour hand. Now, both the minute hand and hour hand are flat, filled with lume and edged in gold. The triangle on the minute hand will actually perfectly overlap the indices at 3, 6, 9, and 12, which I find incredibly pleasing. At first, I thought this would make the watch difficult to read, but you really do get used to it. You can just focus on the arm of the minute hand. The second hand is also gold and has a lollipop that overlaps the circles in the same manner as the triangle of of the minute hand. There's just something about the symmetrical dial and these overlapping hands that makes this watch so aesthetically pleasing. Not to mention, the minute hand reaches nicely all the way to the dashes at the edge of the dial. Now the lume is bright and responsive. It doesn't quite keep pace with the Seiko on the right, but it isn't bad either. And here is the watch on my 6 3/4 inch wrist. I think this is a perfect size for me. It wears comfortable and looks great. Pros and cons, starting with the pros. Well, vintage-inspired watches are very popular right now, but this Royalguard 200 really channels that vintage feel. First, this domed sapphire really has that acrylic warmth. I'm not exactly sure how they did it, but I think it has something to do with the color of the dial. Second, the bracelet is absurdly comfortable with its 4mm taper. I also love the high polish on the outer links. It adds a bit of flash to the watch without being too loud. Third, I love this large crown. I generally love large crowns, and I think it looks good here, and then makes winding and operating the watch that much easier. Finally, the overall color scheme and aesthetics of this watch are spot on. The black dial, gilt indices, and faded blue bezel go together perfectly. For cons, I only have a few. I wish the edge of the bezel was a bit taller, so it was easier to get a good grip on. Second, it would be nice to have a no-date movement to eliminate the ghost position. However, those are really the only two nitpicks I have with this particular watch. As for comparables, for a bit more, you could consider a Laurier Neptune. This is another watch that really captures that vintage feel. For a slightly more contemporary, vintage-inspired diver, check out the Notice Sector Dive. I will pop up a review of that watch in the upper right hand corner now. Finally, for about the same price, you could consider the Spinnaker Fluce. That said, of all these watches, the Royalguard 200 is definitely my favorite of the bunch. So there you have it, the Royalguard 200 from Imperial Watch Co. What do you think about this watch? Let me know in the comments section below. As always, if you're enjoying the contents of this channel, I invite you to subscribe, and if you like the contents of this individual video, please give it a thumbs up. That's all for this time. My name is Jason, and you have been watching Just Watches.